Okay, good to be here. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. This is our first podcast recorded in the new studio at BCTV on Kirkham Street in Branford. We've got Doug in the booth, who is built and designed this amazing studio and is directing this. And we're really happy to be here. And so those have listened for a long time know that we used to record and had many guests on video feed, talk about local issues, especially Branford. Expect some changes going forward. We will talk, yes, about Branford and shoreline issues, but we're going to expand it more towards Connecticut. We will talk about Trump. We'll talk about national topics as we go forward. Also, in front of me is a couch, and there's a whole system here that we'll have a guest. We will have Jamie Cosgrove in a few weeks after the budget passes. We'll talk to him. We'll talk about him a little bit tonight. But we'll have him in person. We'll have many people from the state, and not just politicians, but a variety of topics that are interest to me and I think are interest of the community. If you are interested in a particular topic, or you're a guest that you think is something that the general public would be interested in, please send me a message. Message me on Facebook, either on Branford 7 or on Steve Mazzacane, the Facebook page, and I can see if we can work that in and talk about why that's of interest. Most of you know my style. I tend to be, I look at facts, I want to look at analysis, I want something that's challenging, and so we're trying to focus on topics that do that. So if it is something that you have an interest in doing, please send me a message, let me know. Okay, over the weekend, in talking about just things happening before we get to anything politics or heavier, I went to the Legacy Theater to see a show called Chaz Esposito Sings Legends of the 60s. And this is not something normally I would go see. I obviously see a bunch of new shows, but that's not a topic that would jump out at me. Legacy is a lot of fun to go see a bunch of shows at. Every year they have many, many productions, but this year, as I do every year, there's a main stage series, and there's 4 productions in that main stage series. So you have Sweeney Todd coming up, you have Noises Off coming up that are Broadway productions. Really looking forward to those. But this one I went to review, and it was Chaz Esposito Sings Legends of the 60s. And it's interesting. When I was growing up, many know that I grew up really religious, and we didn't really listen to a lot of popular music. I grew up in Derby. My grandmother lived in Madison. And so part of what we did was we had 45-minute rides on a regular basis to my grandmother's. My mother listened to, or the radio station we had on all the time, I'm not sure it still exists in Connecticut, but it's called Big D 103. And Big D 103 was all the 50s and 60s and the oldies and what have you. So when kids 7, 8, 9, 10 were listening to Madonna and to Prince, we were listening to Bobby Darin. We were listening to, all these old songs, and we would sing them constantly. That's what was in our head. For 45 minutes to Madison, 45 minutes from Madison, we'd be listening to these same songs. And so it was interesting sitting there. The show starts, and it was, a couple songs going on early on. It's like, okay, I know that song. And then Chaz Esposito, the host, does a really, really, really good job of getting the audience involved, and it becomes more interactive. And I had all these flashbacks of all these songs I used to listen to in the backseat of the car driving to my grandmother's house with my mother and my sister when I was a young kid. So a really, really good nostalgic show, worth seeing. Sometimes there are, people who are just good at getting the audience going. And Chaz Esposito did that. I think by the time I left, there was no way not to have a smile on your face. It was a really, really good show, an entertaining show. It is running for 2 more weeks until the 18th. Strongly suggest you grab tickets to that and go check it out. And also check out the rest of the main stage season. There's an original show called Long Days, which is coming up. I don't know anything about this show, but original works are vital in theater. Like things you've never heard of. Somebody local wrote a play and developed this are amazing. Now, maybe it's not very good, but there's also a chance that it's amazing and it becomes something and then goes on to be off Broadway or even Broadway down the road. We support the arts by supporting it even at that level. So if you are someone who wants to support huge productions, great. But if you want to really support the arts and people who are taking a risk in the arts and taking a chance and being creative, go see shows that you've never heard of before. And that's the second one in the main stage season. And then after that, Sweeney Todd, everybody's heard of Sweeney Todd, and then Noises Off is there. And that will be 2 great shows, and I'm looking forward to season. But you have 2 more weeks of Chaz Esposito. Go check that out. It's definitely worth seeing. And I hope you have a good time. I had a great time. That's not the music most people my age in their mid-40s remember, but it was for me because we listened to it all the time in the car, and it was just a really good time. And they have on stage, and the Legacy stage is not that big. On stage is probably 10, 12 people. You have every member of a big band being there, a piano's there, 2 singers singing along with Chaz, and a really, really good time. So check that out at Legacy Theater if you get a chance over the next 2 weeks. So coming up to, there's a lot of news, but the biggest news in Branford, well, unfortunately, the biggest news in Branford was a terrible incident that happened. I'm not going to get into that. As I was in this studio last week preparing, doing some setting stuff with Doug, the news came across about the terrible incident, the murder of a young boy in Branford. And that kind of put a pall over pretty much everything. But over the last week, it's really, really amazing that you really begin to appreciate living in a small town. You begin to appreciate, if we lived in New York, this stuff happens on a regular, but even as heinous as this was, you kind of come used to it. Being in Branford, being in Guilford, being in East Haven, being in Madison or North Branford, these things are not normal. These are not things that we see every day. And seeing the way the community kind of came together, the religious service was packed. There's another one tomorrow. The amount of people commenting, people are they raised far more than they were planning on raising for the family, for the funeral costs. When things like this happen, people just want to do something. There's just this need to donate $5, to comment, to do something that says, I want to do something for this family and I want to care for this family. And I feel we are lucky to live in a community like we do. We're lucky to live in a town where people so quickly come together, so quickly come to whatever comfort they can give to that person. And so handling the messaging on Branford 7, on my personal page, posting photos of the young boy. I hope we remember him with that smile on his face. I hope the town remembers him that way. I hope his mother and his 16-year-old sister get some degree of peace. There's no way to get complete peace, but some degree of peace in the future. And as awful and heinous as that was, seeing a community come together is really an amazing thing, and I'm happy to be a part of that. I'm happy to live in the town that I live in the area that I live in. The other news, going to more politics, is that in Branford anyway, that the first selectman, Jamie Cosgrove, announced he is not seeking re-election. So that is a big deal. That's a big deal in Branford. If you were here 12, 13 years ago when he first announced that he would be leaving, when he would be running, both parties wanted him to run. He comes from a longtime Democratic family. He chose to run as a Republican, and the question I'll get to in a second is why is that happening, and we'll talk about that. But his decision to run came from a series of things that were happening in town. The previous first selectman was Unctor Ross. Unctor Ross was a very, very good man. He ran 6 years prior, then chose not to run. Then he ran again for 6 years. I think if you talk to most people who were around for both of those sets of 6 years, the first time was very, very good. The next time there were some issues. And a lot of that stemmed from the taking of a property, the Tabor property. That came with costs of about $20 million to taxpayers. It was deemed illegal by the court system. It was a mess. And it dragged out, and the town, in its attempt to try to cover itself, kept suing and kept appealing decisions. And so there was that issue. There was also an issue of how to use the property that they took. They took this property saying we needed this for town functions, but never did. And the property itself, the Tabor property, is not really conducive to that, primarily because the main access to that area is floods. Tabor Drive is a road that floods. It's not something that can be used on a regular basis, and every other way out of it is primarily residential neighborhoods. So there were a lot of controversies going on at the time, a lot of money being spent on legal/political issues. And as much as a lot that Unk did was very, very good, this was kind of a pall hanging over it, and it just didn't end. We also had one resident who was at meetings yelling and screaming on a regular basis. We had issues of potentially Costco coming to town, and the current administration didn't want that. So Cosgrove ran, and it was a contested race early on against Andy Campbell. But Cosgrove, I would say he won fairly easily at that point. And very quickly, we solved, and there was no more lawsuits. Those were done. We're not putting anything at the Tabor property. We're keeping Democrats and Republicans in place. We're making sure we have a bipartisan government. If you wanted to run for a board or commission, you can now go directly to the first selectman's office instead of going through your political party. So there were active steps to remove the political aspects that had dominated Branford politics for a little bit out of it. And to anybody who knew Cosgrove, they knew politics wasn't his thing. He cared about the town. He had 2 kids in the school system. His wife is a teacher. He was not looking to run for governor. He was not looking to be a congressman. He wanted to help fix and make Branford. I wouldn't say fix, because Branford wasn't broken. There were just issues that needed to be solved that were lingering for a very long time, and those were very, very, very costly. So he ran. Then he ran. I'm trying to think of the people he ran against. It was Andy Campbell. He ran against the Democrats, put up Mark Rabinowitz, very good man, former principal at Tisco. Probably never should have been a candidate for first selectman, but they were looking for people. Linda Mallow was in there one year. I don't know who. I'm missing somebody, but I don't remember who it was. Oh, Tom Brockett was another one. So I think he ran without an opponent twice, and he ran with an opponent 4 times total. And it was never especially close. The last time he ran unopposed, but the Democrats, because he ran unopposed, because Jamie wasn't forced to run an aggressive campaign, Democrats were able to pick up some seats on the RTM and took control of the RTM. And that brings us to where we are today. So when Cosgrove announced that he was no longer going to be running, he also announced that he was going to support Jeff Follett. Jeff Follett is a longtime member of the Board of Finance, about 25 years on the Board of Finance. Raised in Branford, one of the first EMTs in Branford. He's a Branford guy, but a Democrat, just like Cosgrove was in the past. And there is what Follett has already said, is that he will be running as a Republican. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that, people in town need to fully understand. We have Trump in office. We have this, massive, everything is political now. Every argument you have is political. You're either left or right. If you try to say in the middle, the opposing side is going to paint you as something. If I say this computer mouse is black, somebody's going to say it's racist, or it's Democrat or Republican or something. You can't have an opinion or a statement without it becoming political now. And unfortunately, that has, to some extent, creeped into especially the Democratic Party in Branford. A little bit on the Republican side, but the difference is on the Republican side, you have at the top Jamie Cosgrove, Ray Ingraham. You have people who are not politics first people. On the Democratic side, you have people who are, in many cases, new to the town and hyper political. Like, they will fight just to fight because they want to be against whatever the other side is. And so that battle has resulted in truly, I would say, outright lies or significant misconceptions being pushed about the town, about Cosgrove, and an example of that is, I think it was 4 years ago, the Democratic Party running against Brockett was the candidate against Jamie Cosgrove, started some nonsense about Cosgrove family owns property. One of the tenants of the property is is a landscaper who does contract work for the town and has done contract work for the town for like 20 years. They're relatively new to that property. So they made up this nonsense that somehow Cosgrove was funneling money from the town to that company to him, which was just nonsense. It was made up. And there's quotes in papers of Brockett and people in town on the Democratic side literally saying, oh, we got to get to the bottom of this, or he should resign, or he should. And we found no